Hotform versus VLPS.
Players are sitting down and getting ready for their match. Once again, everybody, welcome back to the Hearthstone Americas Championship. This is the last decider match between VLPS and Hotform. I'm TJ, joined by Robert A. Wing, and of course, Savitz once again bringing out the desk. And once again, the final decider match. This decides the last player that we're going to see in the semifinals. Savitz, what have you thought of these guys coming into today?
Well, they are both really good players. They are some of the a little bit lesser known players. Like somebody like Trump is way more known, but these are really good players. I've been following them for quite a while now. They are like players of 2015, I would say.
Yeah, and Robert, you've had some time to spend time with these players over the course of the last couple of days and the last week. What have you thought after speaking with them quite a bit?
VLPS is definitely one of those players who he's really, really skilled, just incredibly good at the game, but he kind of feels like he's in a position where he wants to prove himself and kind of prove to the rest of the world that, you know, he can be that good. You know, kind of starstruck by some of these bigger names, wants to be like them. Hotform, you know, as I mentioned earlier on the desk, you know, very confident, came into this telling everyone quite plainly that he was going to win the Americas Championship. Suffered a mild setback in his first round, but obviously has battled back, and now he has a chance to win one of those spots. So both very good players, both very nice guys to be around.
Yeah, and it looks like we are going to jump right into game number one. Hotform versus VLPS. Hotform is going to throw out his Patron Warrior first, and of course VLPS with his Hunter. And I believe that this is one of the only hybrid Hunters in the tournament.
The hybrid Hunter quite good, but the Warrior is not a good matchup for it. Warrior is an excellent class to go up against it because of the weapons and the amount of board clears. And also having that hero power, it's one of the hero powers that can combat the Hunter hero power, and you're not on a clock like some of the other classes.
Yeah, this is definitely not a matchup VLPS wants to open up into, and it's important to note, Hotform obviously bringing Patron Warrior, his own version with Loot Hoarder, which some players over the course of the week were like, Loot Hoarder? Still in your lineup? What's that? But VLPS is running Control Warrior, so these are two players who come in with very different paradigms as far as their deck selections go. They have very different opinions of what's going to get them to that semifinals match.
Yeah, Savitz, what is Loot Hoarder replacing in a lot of these Patron lineups? What did Hotform choose to take out, you think, to keep that card in as cycle?
He might have taken out the Enormous Inventor or something like Harrison Jones. So if he wants to curve out nicely, that might be the way to go. Just trying to maximize those turn 2 plays. Unstable Ghoul is also another thing that he might have taken out. Well, I guess not, but it's something he could have taken out because you can only play one of those minions on turn 2. So
speaking of curving out nicely there, VLPS takes the Leper Gnome right off the top, which is exactly what you want to be doing as the Hunter in this matchup. You've just got to try to push as much aggression as possible, try to whittle them down before they can use things like Armor Smith and Unstable Ghoul, shield blocks and stuff to get their HP up. This is very much an uphill battle for VLPS, but he has the tools in his hands thus far. Knife Juggler might even be better. He's actually going to go ahead and just put down the Freezing Trap there to try to get rid of that Armor Smith.
But Hotform does have an Unstable Ghoul, so he can just protect that Armor Smith for now. Maybe get some extra armor. He doesn't need to attack into the trap.
Rob, I think you really said it. An uphill battle is sort of the description of this matchup from the Hybrid Hunter's perspective. Yeah, it's not quite as, potentially one-sided as a face hunter or more aggressive hunter, because you do curve out into high mains, which is a tough card for warriors to deal with. All warriors, not just hybrid or Patron Warriors. So he does have a little bit better of a time, but it's going to be rough.
This is definitely one of the best win conditions for the Hunter. To get those high mains out there, it's quite possible that often the Warrior cannot answer it effectively, or at all.
Yeah, this is actually just an extremely bad spot for VLPS to be into, because he actually just can't clear the Unstable Ghoul with what's on board. He has to commit more resources, understanding that anything with 1 health is going to die once that Unstable Ghoul explodes. The Armor Smith makes it even worse because he's just going to keep generating a bunch of armor. So VLPS, as much as he has a nice opening curve, Hotform is drawn into some terrific answers and really did a good job on his mulligans.
Oh yeah, good sequencing by Hotform here. Going to bounce that Armor Smith back into his hand. Getting that 1 extra armor still from that inner rage. Smart play. Going to perfectly clear these 2 minions and be able to play his Loot Hoarder.
Yeah, both of these players, after talking to them over the course of the last week, are hyper competitive. They've been watching all the matches. They've been making sure that they've been keeping track of each other's decks. So Hotform at this stage knows exactly what kind of traps VLPS runs. He knows exactly what kind of tech cards, if there are any, that VLPS runs. And of course, vice versa. VLPS, he spends all of his time thinking and talking about the games. Last night, after his matches, he just wouldn't stop watching the VODs and going over what potential misplays he was making. So this should be a great match.
I want to point out this past turn 4 for VLPS. This was a very critical turn, I believe. Now, he had options because Loot Hoarder can die to a single Knife Juggle.
Yeah.
So he could have played down a Loot Hoarder or a Knife Juggler and then a Haunted Creeper and hope for the bounce from the Knife Juggler. But if it went wrong and the Loot Hoarder could be traded into the Knife Juggler, VLPS is in a very bad spot.
Yeah,
what he ended up going with there is that kind of more conservative line of play where he just plays down the Haunted Creeper, knows that that's going to trade into the Loot Hoarder, give him more board presence, and then throw in Hero Power. Savige, what do you think of that?
Very conservative play. Personally, I think that with this hand, I would have just went for the gamble. He needs some more help. This is not looking like a winning hand right now. So even though missing the knife on the Loot Hoarder would have allowed the Loot Hoarder to trade for the Juggler, would have been a disaster. I would have just taken the gamble. But it's interesting that VLPS thinks that his chances, even without taking chance, are still good.
Yeah, and that's going in high-stakes matches. Players can sometimes be reluctant to take, risky lines of play. But if you're going into a matchup that you might think is unfavored, usually the risky play is the right one because you need to sort of find those small ways to give yourselves an advantage when otherwise you wouldn't necessarily get one.
When these Knife Jugglers, they come down, they're 3 attack, he needs that damage to start trying to punish Hotform, but those Knife Juggles can actually very much work against him with that Armor Smith on the board.
Hotform could even get a full clear here by using both of his Whirlwinds, but it doesn't feel good to use those precious Whirlwind effects because they are quite valuable for later on as well. But he does have the Death Spite, so I wouldn't be too surprised if he just went for the Whirlwind.
Yeah, and looks like he's definitely giving that play consideration. Whirlwind, as you brought up, those Whirlwinds are very important resources for the patron because they allow the ability to make extra patrons when those come down. They allow the ability to buff up Frothing Berserker. But as you pointed out, it's a very tempting play because all you have to do is just play those 2 Whirlwinds down, you clear your board, and now he's the one with the Savannah Highmane on 6.
From the top on turn 6, he had nothing to play this turn, and he gets the best possible thing, and Hotform does not have the execute. That is precisely what VLPS needed in order to have a chance at this game.
And you can see on his cam, he breathed a huge sigh of relief when he saw that Savannah Highmane come down off the top. And Hotform, he looks a little bit perplexed now. He thought he was in a great position using those double Whirlwinds, but now having to deal with the big threat that Hybrid Hunter has in the Savannah Highmane is going to be tough.
But good for Hotform, he still has plenty of HP left. At 23 on turn 6, and if you have that much on turn 6, you know that you're still doing quite alright.
Yeah, and unfortunately, VLPS's hand is a little bit thin at the moment. And that Haunted Creeper, this is something I brought up in the past. That Haunted Creeper from turn 7 and turn 8 on becomes more and more of a liability.
Yeah. Because
Warsong Commander, even without Emperor Thorson, can come down, play out the patrons, and then suddenly we see it in the hand.
Hotform is actually 1 mana off from just going for that combo. Drops the Emperor Thorison down, and next turn he will be able to go for the Warsong Commander to the patron and get quite a solid creep on the board.
when you draw the creeper later on in the game, like VLPS just did, is that even worth playing? Do you have to have that type of body on the board, or is it too much of a liability, like Rob said?
It's actually a close call. It doesn't accomplish much. I'm sure that VLPS was probably running at least 1 Houndmaster, so having that beast for the potential top deck Houndmaster, it could be nice. But yeah, like you said, it is a liability, and sometimes it can backfire. And in this case, Hotform will be able to spawn extra patrons because of it.
Now, I think VLPS is considering the kill command here because when you look at the rest of his hand, that full combo in his hand, that's a lot of mana right there to do upwards of, well, immediately from that hand, 9 damage. So obviously Hotform's sitting at 15. Got to consider whether or not you play the kill command in addition to the hero power here. Just get that damage in now and look to hope to draw into something like a quick shot, maybe a second kill command, and try to finish off Hotform next turn because that Emperor Thorson means things are about to get really bad for you.
Yeah, it's really scary to have a Emperor on the board, so some people might consider kill commanding in Tier, but I think it's just a losing play to kill command that Emperor at this stage. There's no way he can win the game if he spends extra 5 on anything but face.
Oh, the Armor Smith is so bad for VLPS. The patrons are going to come out, and he's just going to generate so much armor.
Every time one of these patrons bounces into the Haunter Creeper and the Spectral Spiders that come out of it, he's going to gain a health. Now, granted, we also have to keep in mind Unleash the Hounds. We talked about it earlier in the day, but a lot of times against patrons, if they're low enough, it can be used as a finisher. But this might just push Hotform over that health threshold that he needs to survive almost the maximum amount of damage that VLPS can do with the cards that he has available to him in his hand.
Right. Obviously, Unleash the Hounds can only make a maximum of 7 Hounds there.
Yeah.
And even then, Arcane Golem would be one of the things he wants to play, so it would be 6 Hounds in that. And yeah, we see Hotform is safely back up to 12 health. And
Yeah.
All right, so let's count the damage on the board. 12 from the patrons, then 17, 18, 19. 20 damage is represented on the board.
So he has to trade for something.
So he
here.
has to trade for something. He can't hope that Hotform doesn't have anything because he's got lethal just staring at him right there.
And obviously, we brought it up, but right now he's just going to have to use resources to clear. And unfortunately, this is just a very bad situation for VLPS to where, yes, he can try to clear, try to mitigate some of the damage, but it doesn't really help him in his condition of actually winning this match.
And Hotform still with the lethal. He can use the Death Spite to clear off that taunt.
Yeah, and you can see he sees it right away. Actually,
Oh.
he's going to cycle first.
BM shield block.
Yeah.
It is
Hotform's
still-
Canadian. I'm not really, again, I don't think they BM. He's advertised the fact he is a very fun and friendly individual. So.
He's just double checking that he will find it.
Wow. Yeah, okay, he still gets it
I
as
was
long
gonna
as he
say,
trades
still
one in
has
with
it.
the Death Spite.
We're like sitting up on the caster desk doing 1 + 2
Yeah.
equals 3.
Yes. All right, and with that, Hotform is going to take game number 1 with the Patron Warrior. That deck has done work for Hotform today, taking wins in both of his matches on the first try.
It
Feels
can
like-
struggle sometimes, but he got a favorable matchup here, played it flawless, and gets an early lead on this important decider match.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a very mercurial deck in tournament play of late. We've seen players, obviously get their wins with it, and we've seen other players who, have gone even 0-3 with it because, again, you just don't get the combo pieces. Someone plays too much pressure, and we saw both of the animal companions VLPS played were Misha. So didn't get Huffers at all, no Leox to try to boost the attack of other allied minions. So it just wasn't necessarily a situation where VLPS was getting that damage he needed. Plus, the early start being locked behind that unstable ghoul, the Armor Smith being out, it was just kind of an unfortunate turn of events for him. And even then, he got Hotform down to 8 before he got that before Hotform got the Armor Smith off the top.
Yeah, and we haven't seen much Patron over the weekend, but Hotform is really attracted to the deck, and a lot of it is because of the math involved.
Well, when you talked to me about your mage deck, you talked about a lot of innovation, a lot of creative thought application there. How much of it is actual hard numbers and math? Do you have Excel spreadsheets? Do you have
Yeah.
What does it look like on your computer desktop when you're putting a deck together?
A lot of it's in your mind, right? A lot of it is things that you've developed and the kind of pace of Hearthstone that you've identified over tens of thousands of games of just playing every different deck and knowing how the opponents will feel. But there's definitely spreadsheets involved, there's win rates, there's every statistic you can imagine. Hearthstone is that kind of mathematical game more so than any other video game. So it allows you to have that confidence only once you've done the math. And so you need to do that as a player so that you can say for sure what I'm bringing is tried, tested, and true.
And Hotform is a player that has been pretty vocal about how much preparation he actually puts in to matches, not only to his competitive matches, but also to streaming. He makes spreadsheets. He looks at the numbers across the board, and I mean, it's working for him in this series.
Yeah, another player who's very well known for his mathematical approach is Firebat. He also does those spreadsheets, and he did end up winning the World Championship last year, so Hotform might be on the right path.
Yeah, and VLPS, obviously another player. So we see a common theme now between these players who are getting to these levels to where they're winning America's Championships, winning other tournaments. It's the ability to collect this information and kind of sift through and see what's really relevant. And that allows them to have the advantage when they go into these matches because they understand their matchups better than, say, I would.
Yeah, all right. So moving into game number 2 of this final decider match, VLPS is going to stick with that hybrid hunter, and Hotform is going to throw out that tempo mage that we've seen quite a bit over the last couple days.
Excellent hand from VLPS here. I think he might just keep all of it. I mean, he could consider throwing away the piloted shredder, but that's a 1, 2, 3, 4 right there.
I like this decision from VLPS to stay on his hybrid hunter. I think he understands that Hotform's remaining 2 decks, this hunter does pretty well against really all of them. So he's probably going to look to just get a win here with that hybrid hunter and then go from there. Obviously, the rest of his set is a little bit different, his deck set anyway, is a little bit different than hybrid hunter. So go ahead and get that out of the way, get that win, and then you can proceed from there.
I really enjoy watching the Tempo Mage deck from Hotform in action. I haven't played Tempo Mage that much myself recently, but it seems so powerful. I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't see any of it at, for example, the European Championships last weekend.
That's that North American meta in action. We love our tempo mage decks. We love our Flame Wakers and our arcane missiles. But I would very much recommend you play that. It's a super entertaining deck, even when it loses.
That's the forefront of Hearthstone innovation.
Yeah.
There you go.
North American meta, tempo mage, and it all starts with Flame Waker. That's really the card that pulls this together. This minion, 2/4 minion for 3, and every time you cast a spell, it deals 2 random damage to any target. Can be a minion, can be face. Arcane missiles, spells like Flame Cannon, spells like Frostbolt. Any spell does it, but it's these low mana spells that synergize so well that make it so incredibly powerful. And looking at Hotform's hand, he's got Arcane Missiles, he's got Flame Cannon. Sorcerer's Apprentice is a big factor too because it reduces the cost of spells and allows you to chain together these crazy turns where just all these missiles are flying from the Flame Waker.
Interesting decision not to go for the Sorcerer's Apprentice Arcane Missiles there. Apparently he's valuing the Arcane Missiles a little bit higher than just that. Going for that Flame Cannon. Yeah, take out the Mad Scientist. The LPS is going to get a trap. Most likely freezing.
And going into next turn, Hotform has Flame Waker in combination with Arcane Missiles. So he also has the option of Water Elemental. Hotform is curving out really nicely with a lot of options. And VLPS is as well, but can he get through those mirror images in time before, Hotform runs away with the game?
Mirror Image is kind of an interesting card because a lot of players are of the mind, well, it doesn't really do anything if you draw it later in the game, which is usually pretty true. But if you draw in the beginning, it can just be so oppressive to try to get through.
Yeah, it's really powerful here. VLPS not having the Unleash the Hounds. Unleash the Hounds is a way to punish those mirror images quite easily, but they're nowhere to be found for now.
Well, he doesn't take out the Paladin Shredder, but he brings it down to 1 health, so he will be able to ping it off the next turn, and he goes ahead and gets rid of that freezing trap with the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So VLPS does draw into Savannah Highmane, so that's a card that's also tough for mages to deal with. I mean, it's pretty much tough for almost every class to deal with. Yep. And that's one of the reasons why it's put into a lot of these 100 decks.
Now, the Flame Waker survives here, but I want to point out, when you're drawing all these spells and you're playing them, you're not really developing a board, so you're expending resources. You're usually not getting something back. Unstable Portal obviously being an outlier, so for VLPS, he's dealing with it. He's carved through the mirror images. He's ready to go ahead and start, taking out this Flame Waker, look in the next couple turns to play on Savannah Highmane, and Hotform, despite kind of having a really commanding board a turn ago, is looking at a little bit less gimmick and a little bit more raw power.
Oh yeah, that part of the Shredder, it can be pinged off, but that's 2 mana, and Tempo Mage really does like having a lot of tempo earlier. We'll see where the missiles land.
A Stable Master coming out from the Unstable Portal.
That Mana Worm looks like a beast. It isn't. It's not going to get immune. So it's just going to be a 4/2, which, again, that's still damage. And the LPS's board has been cleared, so now he kind of has to figure out what he wants to put on the board. He can use that Glaive Zuka to get rid of something. And this is a situation, he gets the Huffer, but it might not necessarily be what he wants.
It's kind of okay-ish. I think only Leok would have been a bad one. The Misha likely to still get a trade with one of those minions. Now he gets to choose with what he trades that for.
Right, and unfortunately the rest of the LPS's turn is going to be spent using hero power, so I mean that's 2 damage to Hotform, but he probably would have preferred to start gathering up more of a board presence before he plays down the Savannah Highmane.
Well, he can pave the way for his Highmane, make the board as low impact as possible on Hotform's side in order to, make that Savannah Highmane go a little bit further. He also knows that, Tempo Mage is notorious for running out of resources. So if you don't draw into those Arcane Intellects or the cards that, like Spellslinger, that can give you, an extra advantage when you otherwise wouldn't expect one, he can expect that Savannah Highmane to maybe go further than it normally would.
Yeah, I really like it. Even though Hunters often want to go face as much as possible, right now VLPS is on the defense and has a lot of value going into the late game with that Savannah Highmane.
Yeah, and you brought up the fact that Tempo Mage often runs out of cards, and this has been something that to me is so interesting about this particular tournament. Players who are bringing Tempo Mages have tried to fix that shortcoming in the deck, basically by bringing their own different cards that generate more cards. So we've seen Nexus Champ Sarad, we've seen Grand Crusader, we've seen Blingtron, and those cards are all designed to work around the fact that Tempo Mage hits a point where it has no cards.
Yeah, it's a major weakness of the deck, and players are finding ways to work around it.
But also you have cheap cards like Mana Worm that if you take control of the board, it doesn't really matter if you have the cards because it's so hard for your opponent to do anything. VLPS is actually down to 13 health. He's frozen, so the Eagle Horn bow in his hand is not going to do anything, and Hotform has a very intimidating board, so VLPS is staring at a pretty tough situation.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not weak? Mana Worm. Enworm is very, very strong, and we're seeing it here. Like, you know, turn 7, it doesn't matter. It's still gaining attack from spells. It's not one of those minions that really necessarily peters off if you have spells in your hand. So doing a lot of work there. We're seeing a lot of damage come out.
Hotform 1 fireball off from Lethal that of course buff the mana worm and it to get the ping to get the final damage done. It's going to be very hard for VLPS to close out the game before Hotform draws into that.
Yeah, because as you said, one fireball here for the rest of the game is going to be able to close it out. And that's if he can deal with the entire board that's sitting in front of him. And VLPS hasn't managed to put a dent in Hotform's health. He's still sitting at 26. So I just don't really see too much of a way out.
What if he played juggler?
He can clear the board here, which is worth noting, but it's going to put him down at 5 if he does this.
Look at the look on his face. I think he realized that probably should have played the juggler when his opponent doesn't have any minions or any cards in his hand.
And there's the fireball.
Finds the fireball.
Oh, and Hotform is going to take a 2-0 lead in this series. VLPS is in such a bad place right now.
Yeah, a bad place in the series and possibly even a bad place mentally. You know, Hotform had 0 cards going into that last turn. Of course, you sort of expected at some point. But the very first card off the top, you see Hotform just stretching, casual.
I was going to say, he's celebrating with his signature calisthenics there. He does after each match, win or lose. He just gives it a stretch, you know, like, oh, I just want to be limber for my next game.
Yeah, VLPS definitely feeling the pressure right now. That was such a weird thing that he didn't choose to play the knife juggler there. I'm trying to read between the lines that he's probably just so nervous for because of how much is on the line.
Yeah, Savi, so going into a match when you're sort of down 2-0, does it really affect you a lot, or do you have confidence in your lineup and you know that it doesn't really matter, you take it one game at a time? How does that affect you going into a match 0-2?
It might, to some players it might affect a lot. For me, the approach that I think is the best is just to like try to take one game at a time. Just don't think about the previous matches. Don't think what you could have drawn or what went wrong. Maybe a misplay that you made. You need to reset the mindset and just work with the clean slate.
Yeah, and so VLPS is going to need a lot of support. We actually had a chance to sit down and talk with him about how his parents feel about his competitive Hearthstone career.
Well, we know you're going to be excited if you win the Hearthstone World Championship, and you already told us that your viewers are huge supporters of your career, but who else is going to be affected by this victory if it happens?
Probably my parents. They've always supported me. They've been a little bit skeptical with the esports thing, but seeing my performance, seeing how many people tune in and support me would definitely be a pretty great thing for them to experience, and I'd like to think they'd be proud of me if I became the world champion and would support me going forward.
I would imagine parents would be quite proud of that.
Yeah.
I know my parents would be pretty proud of me if I made $100,000 winning a world championship in a card game.
Yeah, I think my parents wouldn't believe me. They've seen me play Hearthstone. They know I'm not good. Like, you sure? You sure you're not lying?
Yeah, VLPS, I mean, coming into this last match, he's down 0-2 in the series. Hotform just needs one more. He just needs to find a win with a Druid, which is the deck that a lot of people love to find themselves in that situation because they can do some pretty crazy things with Innervasive Wild Growth and, of course, the newly added Darnassus Aspirant.
Yeah, Druid is definitely a deck that you can feel confident in going into this last game. And he only needs to win one more. And with the Druid, you can win against absolutely anything. If you get the right draws, you get the Innervates, you get the ramping effects early on. He could just potentially even 3-0 VLPS here.
Yeah, I want to point out too that VLPS is his personal signature deck is that Control Warrior. He's played over thousands of games on it, and it's one of those things where when you're down 0-2, maybe you want to default to that comfort deck where you feel the strongest. But against Druid, you just can't really play it into there. So he's got to stick with this Hunter for now, which he feels gives him the best chance to go ahead and get that win. And as you said, Druid is very much capable of winning against anything. Hunter, the mid-range Hunter back in the day, was considered not necessarily a counter to Druid, but it had a strong matchup. So maybe the hybrid will translate well for VLPS here.
Yeah, one of the biggest strengths of playing the Druid in a Conquest format too is that it doesn't really have any major weaknesses. It used to be weak against some traps, like for example the freezing trap and the mirror, the mirror entity. Those secrets used to be really tough to deal with because you don't have a card that you really want to throw into it. But now with the Darnassus Aspirant, it's the perfect counter for both the mirror entity and the freezing trap.
Yeah. Plus side for VLPS, this opening hand is pretty great.
Yeah, but so is Hotform. Look at that ramp. He's got both the Darnassus Aspirant, which will not only help him ramp, but also contest the Leper Gnome that's put on the board. And then into a Wild Growth or a Shade. He's got multiple options going into the next turn.
Oh, but what a draw. That is exactly what VLPS needed to go ahead and just try to stay in this because, you know, there's a world where the Druid just runs away with it against the Hunter if they get to like 4 or 5 mana while the Hunter's at 2 or 3. And
yeah, extremely important to take care of that Aspirant as fast as he can.
There was a lot of conversation about Aspirant when it was first being previewed, and players were like, this is really going to force some intense decisions because even if your deck is more oriented towards aggression and just running down an opponent's HP really quickly, you have to respect that aspect because if you don't, you're giving basically the Druid a free pass to an early Keeper of the Grove, early swipes, and probably the worst case scenario, early Druid of the Claw.
It's such a powerful card when you draw it early on, but the card is does have its weaknesses too. It's one of the worst cards you can top deck in late game.
Must safeguard the
It can also be used against you, you know, if it comes out of a Shredder, as you said, as if it comes out of the other end of a Mirror Entity. So Darnassus Aspirant is a very interesting card in Hearthstone that came from the Grand Tournament.
Yeah, VLPS is curving out pretty nicely. At least he's being able to utilize all his mana. And he's putting out a lot of damage to Hotform, putting him down to 17 with some burn in his hand with Arcane Golem and Unleashed Hounds. Unleashed Hounds, though, not that good of a card against Druid because you usually only get 2, maybe 3 creatures at the most.
Oh yeah, the Druid in general doesn't flood the board with small minions, but instead plays those big minions, and Unleashed the Hounds not so good against those big Thunderers, like for example the Druid of the Claw, which is likely to come down here.
Druid of the Claw is essentially the sound of a door slamming shut to a Hunter, and you're like, I really want to get to that phase, could you move? And Druid of the Claw is like, I'm going to stay here, and then you have to start throwing resources into it. Just a very nightmarish creature for the Hunter agenda.
It's a small door, and then behind that is another small door, which is the second Druid of the Claw. And then you get to the big door, which is the Ancient of War, which Hotform does have one of in his deck. So VLPS probably going to need an Ironbeak Owl at some point in this game to push through, because a lot of times, Hybrid Hunter, the only big threats that they run are Savannah Highmane, and that might not be enough for him to get through in this match.
This is such an awkward turn for VLPS. He needs to get past this Druid of the Claw, but if he plays the Arcane Golem, he's sending Hotform right to turn 7. And if he plays Unleash the Hounds, it's not really getting a lot out of it. Savij, what do you like here?
I think that just Unleash on the Haunted Creeper is what he has to do. There's no way he can justify giving away a Mana Crystal at this early stage. So Unleash, trade in maybe the Abusive, one of the dogs, use the bow to clear off that. I think that would be my choice in this spot. The Arcane Golem, it's too early for that.
Yeah, especially since it's one of the most crucial mana jumps for Druid in the game, going from 5 to 7 mana. A lot of times 6 mana is sort of that spot where the Druid will end up playing a 5-drop anyway, unless they have a card like Emperor Thorsin. So allowing them to get to 7 mana unlocks Dr. Boom. It unlocks Ancient of Lore. It unlocks Ancient of War, which are all very impactful cards. And VLPS, I mean, he has to go for it now because he realizes it's not going to really be beneficial for him to hold on to it.
Yeah, he did go for it, and it could work out very well, but not right now. For example, that 1 extra mana is going to let Hotform use his hero power and heal a little bit. So, but there is no good news for VLPS is there was no Ancient of War, so he didn't get punished too badly. But Savannah Highmane from the top.
That is exactly what he needs to see. He just needs to get more power on this board. Yeah, unfortunately, Hotform has a fair amount of removal in hand.
Yeah, is it too late?
I don't want to say it is, but at this point, things are really starting to stack up against VLPS. The double Druid the Claw consecutively just drains so many resources from the Hunter, and it's not as if the Hybrid Hunter really has a lot of card draw. In fact, it's kind of just quick shot.
No, and even that doesn't draw an extra card. It just replaces the card. Oh, Leper Gnome. Last top deck was amazing, but this one not so strong. Getting that 1-drop for turn 7, not what you want to be doing.
On the other end, Hotform doesn't really have a lot of cards, it's worth pointing out. He's not sitting on combo. He's not sitting on anything too crazy. Wild Growth really probably will not see use until next turn. He has a Shredder, he has the Shade of Naxxramas, and most important to consider here is those things do not have taunt. They do basically allow for better Unleash the Hounds, although that Druid of the Claw at 6 health is extremely hardy and very difficult to get through.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, you can sort of count the damage that a Hunter is going to be able to do. Once they start running out of cards, you can sort of calculate the maximum damage in a second Highmane, but
he's just got to jam it down. He has to play that Highmane.
Oh yeah, it's a tiny bit late. He would have preferred to have it last turn, but definitely one of the better top decks still that he could get.
Savage Roar should end it, I want to say. Okay, so he doesn't have Savage Roar just yet.
Yeah, it still would. I believe it would be exact lethal with Savage Roar.
He could be doing math at the desk. All right, no, so he gets a Darnassus Aspirant. That's not going to do it.
Could still get it from the bot here.
Oh, no, but that is also good. He has so much power in his hand. What does VLPS need to draw right here that can get him back into this?
Kill Command would allow him to push through. Kill Command would
Kill Command
end
off
the game.
the top. Kill Command off the top, do it with quick shot.
I think even quick shot is enough. Yes, there's 4 hounds.
Plus
there's
hero
4
power.
damage. Quick shot or kill command.
Oh, that is going to be game! VLPS is going to live to fight another day, and the series is going to go 2-1 off the back of the Iron Beak Owl.
That is crazy. VLPS seemed like he was behind that whole game, but a key there was Hotform did not draw into any way to, stop the bleeding. He didn't draw into the Ancient of War to heal, and VLPS is going to stay alive and bring it to a game 4.
Hotform just couldn't close out the game, and VLPS 3 draws in a row, gets turn 6 high main. Lebernom in between, not so good, but turn 8 another high main, and that was enough to take the game.
That Owl just flies in and hands him the victory. He's like, no, VLPS, live.
He had 3 draws. Hotform had 3 draws on the last turn. He had an 8 draw. He had the Wild Growth and excess mana, plus he Wrath for 1. He needed a Savage Roar to win, and he couldn't find it.
I mean, he had the 2 consecutive Druid of the Claws. You can't ask for too much more.
That was pretty nice, too.
Yeah, no, it was a very well-played game, and both players, obviously, VLPS winning it by the skin of his teeth. Like, that was it, but he's alive in this series, and he's going to have another game to try to, stave off being eliminated.
It's going to be really tough for him. VLPS is going into his comfort zone. Demon Handlock and Control Warrior are the 2 decks that he feels the most comfortable with. But Druid is a deck that can handily beat both of those. So it's still an uphill battle for VLPS, but I'm sure that's a bit of momentum that's swinging in his favor. That's going to give him a little bit of confidence moving forward in this match.
We see VLPS's opening hand, at least at the moment, has a Twilight Drake in it, and that's one of those staple cards that you can use as the handlock to put on aggression from turn 4 on. The problem is Druid, more so than any other class, has a great answer to it in the form of that Keeper of the Grove, which can silence it, and then it obviously has 1 health, and it can be hero powered off the board, it can be swiped off the board, not even as the main target, it can be Wrath off the board. So do you maybe try to find a Mountain Giant? Are you really concerned, or is Void Caller something you think is going to help you?
With the coin, I actually think that keeping both the Void Caller and Twilight Drake is a really good strategy. When you're going first, then the Giants are better. But even the Giant can get big game hunted. With those Void Caller and the Twilight Drake, it's very likely that Hotform only has 1 silence available to him, unless he drew exactly both of the Keepers. So either the Void Caller or, oh my goodness, that's the Aspirant, excellent pickup. But that either the Twilight Drake or the Void Caller will not get silenced, and then he will find a lot of value on it. And Hotform potentially looking for a turn 3 Emperor, but VLPS does have that Dark Bomb waiting for the Aspirant.
Mulligans have drastically changed against Druid for a lot of classes, and this is one of those examples where in the past you may not have necessarily kept Dark Bomb against Druids, but now you can't afford to leave Darnassus Aspirant up. So keeping Dark Bomb is almost always the right choice.
Oh yeah.
If you're the handlock player, this is great. There is no Wild Growth that comes out. You've killed the Aspirant. You know you have at least a couple turns in the early game to start getting those life taps in, start looking to play the Twilight Drake, start looking to play the Void Caller.
It's great until you see the Innervate Emperor Thorson come out.
I mean, it looked great before.
That's the nightmare. There's no good way to deal with this. He can only silence it. The only way to really kill it would be a double Dark Bomb play, but obviously one of those was already used. And if he plays the Owl here, he won't be able to play Twilight Drake, Void Caller, or the Mountain Giant. It's a rough spot for VLPS.
And this is one of those reasons why Druid is kind of an apex predator in the Hearthstone tournament format, because, again, the ability to just put out Emperor Thor's that early, you just don't really have a solution to that. Molten Giant can help. It's one of those cards that obviously gets cheaper as your HP goes down, and Mountain Giant has a lot of attack and health, but big game hunter.
Yeah. Beast Insights and things are really looking good for Hotform right now.
Those cards that are in his hands that are getting reduced to are very high impact cards. Maybe not Harrison Jones so much, but Azure Drake is very important. Ancient of War is very important. And again, there's just no answer necessarily to the 5/5 body. He will be able to at least silence it, which is something.
Yeah, but it's already gotten 2 turns of value. It's still a 5/5 body on the board, so yeah, it feels good silencing it, but now all of a sudden he's going to go up against an Ancient of War, which now he doesn't have the Iron Big Owl to silence that. So once again, VLPS is finding himself in these terrible positions early on in his game.
So difficult to deal with that Ancient of War. Not many players are playing Siphon Soul because how expensive it is to cast it. It does cost that 6 mana. There's no real way to deal with that for now.
I was gonna say, this is a crazy situation. Like, yes, he can play the Molten Giant for 3, but then he can't heal bot. He can taunt, which is something. And Mal'Ganis will come down off the top of, or come from the hand, but this is just such a cagey situation for VLPS to be in. And the most important thing here is to find a read that you feel comfortable with when you're staring down so much damage. There could be a Savage Roar in hand, there could be a Druid of the Claw swipe. There's just so many things a Druid could have to end the game.
VLPS,
Oh, right, Jirax is there too.
Yeah, VLPS can set up some big taunts here. Chooses to not use the hero bar before playing the Molten Giant. He could have drawn a card at the cost of 2 health, but he wants to keep his life stolen.
Maybe he just wants to keep as much health as he can.
Yeah.
Well, Darnassus Aspirant is not the best draw off the top for Hotform. And Force of Nature, while it will be good in the future for this game, it is not good immediately. So for once, VLPS should be able to breathe a slight sigh of relief going into the next turn, but still, that's a very scary board to be looking at.
Yeah, you know, obviously Jiraxis has a lot of health, but at the same time, this would be interesting if it's cap. Okay, so it's Bear Form. I was wondering if he was really going for it there, but ooh, and Shadow Flame.
No,
But he doesn't have a Watcher for it. He would love to have an Ancient Watcher to go with it. You could get a full clear with the Watcher, Shadow Flame, and using the Sound of Fury to trade. But right now, what do you even Shadow Flame?
I don't think there really is anything. Ooh, well, nice to be able to Shadow Flame that. But.
Yeah, VLPS gives a slight shake of his head after seeing that draw. He knows that this game might be coming to an end, and this match.
Okay, that
Should do it.
yeah.
That is going to be it. Force of Nature in combination with the Savage Roar, having those 2 minions on the board already.
Hotform
All right.
3-1.
Yeah,
takes the
Hotform
series.
will be the final player moving on to the semifinals of the Hearthstone Americas Championship. And the well played comes out from both players with that Force of Nature Savage Roar. And both fiercely competitive players going into that match with high hopes. And Hotform is the player that comes out on top. These players over the past couple of days have become pretty good friends. And I can say that about a lot of players, but there's your winner, Hotform.
Breathes a sigh of relief. As I said, he was expecting to advance. He was expecting to become the America's champion. And, you know, being able to make it this far continues to prove that he has what it takes to stay here. And very big relief for him, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Hotform, I was talking to him yesterday, he said, you know what, even if I lose today, I still have tomorrow to play, and I still have tomorrow to win. And he came into this day having an uphill battle. He had to win 2 matches in a row to make it to that semifinals, and he did exactly that, getting some love from the crowd as well.
So for VLPS, obviously, this is the end of his road as the America's Championship goes, but what a strong showing for him. This is somebody who came into the North American Qualifier Tournament flying under the radar. A lot of people didn't know just how good he was, and he's really put on quite the show over the course of this tournament at the America's Championship level, and I'm very impressed with him, and there's no doubt in my mind we're going to see so much more of VLPS in the future.
Absolutely, but not today. Unfortunately for him, he's out of the tournament right now. We're down to our 4 semifinalists.
Yeah, and let's take a look at the final wrap-up for Group B. We had, of course, Nice and VLPS, or sorry, Nice and VLPS yesterday. Nice took that. Today we had Hotform take on Molgel. We talked about how Hotform had to make it through 2 matches in order to qualify, and he did that against Molgel as well as VLPS. And those are the 2 semifinalists, also securing their spot at BlizzCon, moving forward into that semifinal. So big congratulations to them. But we are going to have to go to a quick break. We do want to give take this opportunity to give one shout out to our sponsors. Of course, Amazon App Store, as well as Totino's. It's been a fun event across the weekend, and it wouldn't be possible without them. But we are going to have to go to a quick break. But when we come back, the semifinals for the Hearthstone Americas Championship.